I created the Infinite Skills course on Adobe Premiere Pro CS6, and rather than redo the entire course for the Creative Cloud version of Premiere Pro, it made much more sense to take the lessons that I created for CS6 and include them in the Creative Cloud course. The differences between the two products are minimal. Basically, the Creative Cloud just adds more features. But there are some subtle differences in the way the interface looks, and I want to give you a heads up here so as you go through the course, you're not thrown off when you see one interface versus the other. So let's just take a look at them here. On the left, you've got the Creative Cloud version. On the right, we have the CS6 version. And right off the bat, you might not notice any obvious differences. If you take a look at these two monitors here, the source monitor and the program monitor, there's no visual difference to those two guys. If you look down at the bottom here, you see that this project panel looks the same as this one. The only difference is down in the lower left-hand corner. Look over here, you see you have one more little row here, and that's the Sync Settings button down there. That's one big difference when you work with the Creative Cloud version, that you can sync your settings to the Creative Cloud. You also will see that when you open up some of these menus here. The menus across the top look the same, but if you open them up, you'll find a couple of different features inside the menus. For example, I click on File here, you see there's a Sync Settings option. Over on the CS6 version here, there is no such setting. So there'll be some differences in the menus. So when you open them up, you might say, okay, I'm looking at the CS6 version now because there isn't something that's over in the Creative Cloud version. But just be aware that the differences are subtle. And when they are important, I'll point them out to you inside the lessons that I created specifically for the Creative Cloud version. The biggest difference between the two products is down here in the timeline. If you compare this timeline panel to this one, you're going to start seeing some differences. Let's just take a look at these buttons here. There are three of them. It's a marker, a chapter marker for Encore, and this snap button. Well, there's the snap button. There's the marker button, but there is no Encore chapter button. And that's not a problem because you can access Encore chapter buttons inside here anyways. So this is kind of superfluous to begin with. If you look at the headers here, you'll see that they are different from one to the other. Now I'm going to explain these differences in detail in a separate lesson, but just to point them out to you briefly here, notice you've got this little eyeball here and this sync lock here and this blank space. They are the same thing as this eyeball over here, this sync lock here, and then this track lock there. This little spot there, track lock on, track lock off, track lock off, track lock on, like that. That's how that works. Instead of saying video 1 and audio 1, it says V1 and A1 here. So that's a little different, but not much. Down here, you have some more audio controls, though. You have this M and S. That's mute and solo. This is the mute button here. Either you're playing it or you're muting it, but there is no solo button, so that's a new thing over there. These guys here are a little bit different in their appearance, and they're also different in their functionality, but that's a pretty specific kind of high-level editing thing. I'm going to get to that later in the course, so just be aware, though, they do look a little bit different from one to the other. You're going to see these little buttons here that say FX, and if I spread this thing out by pressing the plus key a couple times, you'll start seeing the FX over there as well. That's how you just access effects inside the clips. The same thing applies over here, it's just a different methodology. I'll do the plus again, and you get a little drop-down list here, whereas here it's this little button that gets you to that drop-down list. That's the only difference there. The clips look a little different in terms of how they display when you click on them. You can see the differences there. There are these little buttons down here that allow you to access some track features, keyframes. That gives you this little yellow line there. And then the way the headers look here with these little thumbnails on or off. You don't have them here. Instead, you access them through this little wrench here, this little settings button. So the only difference here is that this applies to all the tracks versus just individual tracks down here. There are a couple of other buttons here in the Creative Cloud version that are not inside the CS6 version. So here's the linked selection button. This is a new feature inside the Creative Cloud version, which is actually a special feature when you work with something called nested sequences, and I talk about that in a separate lesson. As you work on the course, you're going to be opening up Premiere Pro projects that I created. Let me show you that process. You go File, Open Project. And you're going to go to the Working Files folder and then open up projects this way. The projects are going to be numerical. They're going to be numbered based upon the lesson number. But when I started creating projects in the Creative Cloud, I retained some of the numeric values, but I also shifted over to alphabetize things. So there'll be some things that are alphabetical, just to be aware of that. Some things will be not numerical, they'll be alphabetical, just so you know. And that's about it. The differences are subtle, so I think it won't throw you off too much, but just be aware that as you go through the course, sometimes you're going to be working in the CS6 interface, and sometimes you're going to be working in the Creative Cloud interface. But when there's a really important difference in the Creative Cloud side of things, I'll point that out to you.